riding down Highway 61. Sides of the roads all lined with fields, nothing but sunset in the windshield. Feel it as soon as I ride into town. This is where I go to slow down. Miles and miles of soybeans and corn. I'm in the place where the blues was born. About a mile from the big muddy river, place I'll always remember. Cabin on the lake and a fishing pole. Forever here I'll rest my soul. I can feel my worries drift away from being out in the sun all day. No matter where in the world I go, I'll always find home on the banks of that oxbow.
What's up, guys? Brad Chappell back at the Grizzly Jig Show 2024. We're having a blast, and I got the stash on the end as he's been on there.
Yeah,
Not
starting
always.
to hang around a little bit.
He's starting to try to hang in here a little bit more. Also, I got another guy that's been tearing it up on the tournament trail here for the last couple of years, and I came up to, and I'm gonna let him introduce himself before I spill everything. But I've been trying to get him on the podcast for 3 years. He's been dodging me, I think. But
he definitely.
Go ahead and introduce
Should have seen him
yourself.
looking for him out there.
I'm Clay Gann. I'm a guide in Texas and been tournament crappie fishing now on the national tour for 3 years.
Well, I met you right when you started then over in Shreveport, I believe it was.
You do more than tournament fishing, though, don't you?
I guide for a
Okay,
living on Lake Fork, Lake Palestine, and beautiful Lake of the Pines. Blessed to be in an awesome area in East Texas.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I mean, and the subject line here I really want to dive into is boat control whenever you're trying to live scope. How can you describe and how you can help us become better at controlling boats? Both of you guys, and I'm going to talk about as well some of the tips and techniques to up your game controlling your boat, and we'll talk about how important it is. And Dustin, I see you shaking your head already. You're ready. You really want to spit out stuff.
No, I always think boat control, hands down, is the most important part of any type of fishing with live scope in general. I think even with long lining or anything, boat control is probably my most important thing to learn and get better at. As soon as you get good at boat control, I feel like everything else starts falling into place a little bit. So that's what I was just thinking. That's a good topic, and I'm excited to hear Clay's opinion on boat control and kind of how maybe some tips on how to learn it or what you did to figure things out.
Yeah, I think what's funny for me is I got into crappie fishing in 2015, and I did it in a duck boat with a old Terra remote. I did a remote steer trolling motor.
Yeah.
And then Todd and we started fishing cat, and we knew he was going to beat Paul O'Beer and these guys fishing timber. And so I immediately switched to foot control trolling motor because I'd never ran one in my life. And so something I know that helped me get better early on with boat control was I only got the weekends to pre-fish for these tournaments. And so I was going. Like, it didn't matter if it was 25-mile-an-hour winds or 5-mile-an-hour winds or whatever else. I was going to have to go pre-fish those days that I had, the weekend before the tournaments and stuff like that. So I know early on going in adverse conditions. I'm not telling you to go out and endanger yourself
Right.
at 30 mile an hour or whatever, but if you got that day where you're looking at the weather, the weather's coming up the forecast, and you're like, oh, man, it's going to be 15-plus miles. It's going to be really rough out there. Obviously, don't put yourself in danger, but, go out there and get in those areas where you can fish, and that's when you can really hone your game.
And we're going to dig into this topic more and more, and I'll get Dustin fired up, and he probably won't shut up after that. But, I think about these calm days, too. How critical it is to control a boat to keep it from drifting, different things. And now, through the aid of power brakes and different trolling motors on the back, how it's helped that aspect. But whenever I didn't have any kind of braking system on my boat, I always try to face into the wind was my number one thing. Whenever I stopped, I always kind of planned out, all right, I'm going to go into the wind this direction. That way, if I stop, I don't want to blow over fish.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably one of the main keys to catching fish is not letting them know that you're there.
Mm-hmm.
If they get that idea that this big shadow is hovering over me and my partners are leaving, it's probably not a good thing.
Yeah. Right. How are you liking those brakes, by the way? I haven't really got a report since you got them put on.
You know, it's definitely a game changer, as they say.
Yeah.
And now I completely understand. And I knew it, but I honestly thought the more that I did it without brakes, the better I would be at it. And I do feel that way. But they are definitely an advantage. That if you don't have brakes, you're like, man, and you get on a boat that has them and fish with somebody that has them, you're like, I don't know how I ever do it without them.
Yeah, I was going to say,
the more you get used to them, the easier it becomes mastering them. But it's kind of like getting used to a foot control trolling motor. You've got to know how long to hold down the button and actually control these boats. And every boat, a light boat is a whole lot different than a big, heavy glass boat. Like, my Ranger's a heavy sit-down boat compared to a light boat. It'll drift faster.
Yeah.
But, I know you're fishing out aluminum.
Yeah, yours probably stops a lot slower compared to aluminum. I mean, when I push mine, I could set it high enough to dang near throw you out of the front of the boat, which yours I feel like would probably take a minute to pull on it because it's so
not
heavy.
Much.
Really?
No.
It pulls it pretty good?
Yeah. It'll snap it back because if you slap down on that button and hold it for too long, you're going to be like, whoa.
Yeah.
I'm actually going back too much.
You see the wake coming in front of the Yeah. No.
I catch myself fishing and not driving sometimes, is what I call it, because I'll sit there and like it's saying you're hitting the brakes, and all of a sudden I'm not glancing at that graph. I've got my bait by the fish, and
yeah.
So I quit watching that miles per hour, making sure it's at 0, and all of a sudden then I'm start doing it. I'm reaching out, leaning.
You're like, oh, I'm losing it. Yeah, I would say the best thing too is lakes have a crazy amount of fish. All the lakes you can drop and find trash fish or whatever. I would almost recommend just a little tidbit to learn boat control. Leave your poles at home, one or two trips, and go and find these fish on the live scope and just follow them around. Keep them bright in the screen. See how far they are from the screen, and just play around on your trolling motor and boat. Because, I mean, if we're talking about boat control, that means we're talking from beginner and on. And if I was to first restart it, I probably needed to leave my stuff at home and just go a solid half a day or day of trolling around, going around obstacles and just learning my foot pedal, how you back your boat up, turn your boat around, all that stuff. I would almost say you could spend a lot of time practicing that to get it down.
Another thing that I think that helps learning is fishing around bridge pilings.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Bridge pilings.
And docks.
With a current or with any kind of wind, if you're wanting to stay right there at a bridge piling and not drift off too far, drift too far up on top of it, is something that you can visually see that's a stationary object that you're going to get that current influx from, possibly, or wind. But a great way to really learn boat control, in my mind, is by fishing a bridge pillar.
Yeah.
What would you call it, a pillar?
Yeah, a bridge pillar or a pier, either one. But I would say standing timber is a good one, too.
Yeah, same thing.
Because the same concept, especially when there's fish on the visible standing timber, because you can teach yourself to get all in one kind of machine, if you will, to where when I turn it to the right, I'm right there practicing dropping on those timber. But when the timber's holding fish, too, you can see where you're dropping and everything. That's a super good. So standing timber lake is great to go learn at, too. Somebody around Lake of the Pines or Lake Fork would be perfect.
Yeah, that's something when people are trying to learn live scope and stuff like that. That's something I tell them to go to a bridge piling or a piece of standing timber that you can actually see. That way you're seeing it and you can drop your jig next to it, then see it on the live scope. And then I've got a video I did on my Clay Can Fishing page where I'm 10 feet from the tree and I pitch to it and I'm showing them that you're 10 feet. You're watching it go beside the tree. Now you're watching on your screen go from right back to left. I'm trying to teach that to and from versus left and right on the live scope. But also, like you're talking about, holding it on the tree. Keep yourself in position there.
A lot of times what'll happen is if you don't use the different settings on the power of the trolling motor, you can blow on top of things just as easy from floating it back away from things. I think that's where it comes in the fine line of getting a fixed object. And like I said, you don't want to go out there when it's easy fishing. But even these slack days, these it's dead
I'd say
calm
a dead calm
out.
day is as hard as a windy
It's
one.
just about as hard as a real windy day from keeping from drifting over the top of things.
The boat moving and
And it is a lot easier if you do have power brakes on the back, or some form of trolling motors on the back of the boat to actually pull it back. But beforehand, if you don't, you need to learn how to not to push it too much and to drift over the top of them. But fixed objects, slack days, calm days, and real windy days, I think will really benefit you in the long run. Would you describe chasing open water fish or standing timber as far as boat control would be more important?
I think as far as timber fishing, probably, I don't know. I mean, it's all kind of crazy, especially once you go to Grenada and chase fish. Those things are everywhere.
Different world. Darbone.
I mean, it takes some boat control, but it's pretty chaotic as well. It'd be kind of hard to practice that other than just doing it.
And thick standing timber can be super challenging. Getting to a fish when you have to maneuver around the trees, it's crazy because I don't have to look up even if there's trees up out of the water and it's really thick, because we've taught ourselves now with boat control. You can see those trees with live scope and still work your boat around them without having to look up, because you can see when they're bright and go a little bit left. I mean, and that's I feel like next level stuff, but you can eventually get to that where, some of us can straight fly through that stuff, when I think it'd be hard for a normal person without live scope to go and just looking at them. You know what I'm saying? So live scope and boat control can be and help you out a ton.
I noticed this one day. I was getting out and we were live scoping open water fish, and I kept noticing my boat kind of want to pull to the right, and I went back and looked in the back of my motor, and then I had it kicked to the I had it kicked to one side, and I really didn't pick that up when I was up front. I was like, man, this boat is just wanting to pull a certain direction. But do you leave your motor down or do you leave your motor up?
I leave mine down most of the time, and and that's something fishing with Todd when we first started fishing. I'm sure he learned it out of trial and error, like you're talking about. But he always made sure his motor was straight when we first shut the thing down. Because that's something I generally do.
I learned that the hard way also. I always wondered, I think, there's something with my boat. When it keeps kicking right, there's something with my back. There's something wrong. And then I'm starting to figure out when I'd shut my motor off, I'm always like turning a little bit, and my motor would be set and turn. So now I'll trim it all the way down and straight. And it seems, because if you trim it all the way up out of the water, like when I try to get shallow,
kind of fishtails
will go everywhere, yes.
Yeah, and guiding too, I get, people different weight capacities on my boat. And so I'll actually do it on purpose some days. If I know, like, the guy's going to sit on the right every time and the boat will drag a little bit to turn it the other direction.
I like that. So. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Even lowering it down all the way, I know Dustin hit on that a second ago, but if you leave it, on tilted up where you were on pad running to the lake,
big difference.
The further down you can get that, it kind of sets that boat down further to me and keeps it steering correctly. But if you leave it up, you don't have that drag, and it kind of wants to do that fishtailing action in the backside.
Yep,
something else is great about power poles with using the drift paddles. I'll never forget, we didn't have them. I had a 20-foot Ranger at Washington the first year we went, and I think it was the third day pre-fishing was glass. And so we're trying to cover water and look at these open water fish, and I'd be watching those guys, and they'd have those power poles, and they'd launch those power poles, and that thing would just sit down.
Yeah.
That was the deciding factor for me, that we need to go ahead and pull the trigger on that.
It's all these equipment, and like I said, Terry Stewart, and he won ACT and a couple crappie masters, a bunch of MCCs through the year. But he was the first guy that I ever seen put trolling motors on the back, and he was using them spider rigging, and at first I was like, this guy's nuts. And I love Terry Stewart. I know him real well. But it was like, why is he putting these trolling motors on the back of this boat? And all of a sudden, we realized with live sonars that come around, he's using them for brakes and also for the stealth part. So it was a big help for him, not discounting him by any means, but trolling motors will help you catch more fish in the long run as well, I believe.
I remember seeing him in 2020 for the first time, and that big old huge Ranger with the trolling motors on there, and I was baffled. I had no idea.
Well, I remember we fished the ACT, and everybody was like, hey, look at that. What's on the backside of this boat? And I think we actually shot a YouTube video at 2020 with Terry Stewart describing why he had the trolling motors on the back of his boat. And nowadays you see all you tournament guys.
You can't find a boat without it.
Everybody has them on there because they have helped so much with boat control. And that's the reason people put trolling motors on the back is for boat control.
And they're still innovating the back brakes to where now we got the nudge system and different things. Now you can push yourself from the back a little bit more because the fish can get that spooky sometimes. So who knows where it's all going to go and end up in the long run. But
six trolling motors on the back.
Yeah.
2 for pushing forward.
Yeah, exactly.
Parachutes, little jet rockets.
One for each way. Yeah.
I mean, it's, what's next? I mean,
really.
But you look at the now side of things, I'm hearing bass guys are even starting to put trolling motors on the back.
Yep, for sure.
I would have never dreamed that. But we're kind of leading the fishing industry on some of the things that we're doing to control boats. I know Ronnie and Steve, years past, spider rigging would throw out chains. They even would fill up their boat and everything else.
I don't know how we're going to do that part, but, well, maybe sandbags, put more weight in our boats now. So I know a few tournament anglers do that. Cale Ward, with his aluminum boat, he'll throw big sandbags up front to hold his front end down for that same reason. So anymore, some boats are making the gas tanks, they're moving them into the middle of their boat or more towards the front to keep it sturdier. So a lot of things keep going on that you think that there's no room to initiate more things, but it just keeps going.
Just for to catch more of these crappie.
Yeah, just for a crappie. Just for the dang crappie. Speaking of, though, this is off topic a little bit, but I got to know, I ain't talked to you since. How was Coach Prime and the trip you took?
Oh, yeah,
on?
definitely.
Okay, so that's kind of a misconception.
I got to hear this. Oh,
so,
no.
Not a misconception.
No misconception.
All right, so I have taken him fishing, but it was back in 2020. And he started coaching shortly after, so we haven't been since then.
Gotcha.
And
he was Jackson State then.
He was at Jackson State, and now he's obviously at Colorado, and all that's blown up. And he was home this year for Christmas, and so we were going to go, and he's wanting to put crappie in his pond. So I went and caught some big black crappie.
Gotcha.
And took him to his house, and I didn't even know if he was going to be there for sure or not. And he was almost home, so he made me wait for him. And we put the fish back in the lake. And as soon as I threw the last one back, he was like, "Man, I should have took a picture of those." He said, "Let's go take a picture."
Okay.
So we went up to the boat, took a picture, and I didn't even know what he was going to do. He was like, "I'm going to drop some traffic your way tomorrow." And then he did that post where he said he was going to let me pick a follower of mine and go fishing. So we're going to have to then the weather turned horrible.
Yeah.
And so we're going to have to fast forward that to probably the spring or into the summer now. So he's a
I
great
bet you're
guy.
looking forward to that one, ain't you?
We've texted over the years and talked ever since he's been with me and everything, and just a great guy.
That's awesome.
I know I've watched this series, and like I said, this is not really crappie stuff.
It's got something to do with it.
It was. I did watch his series when he came to Jackson State. I hadn't seen the Colorado one yet, but
I watched one this year. It's good.
That guy is a special human being for sure.
I mean, he's just so outgoing and
pretty down to earth.
Uplifting. That morning we met that morning, and he's like, "I'll be with you in just a second, my man. I do a devotion every morning. I'm going to do that real quick, and then we're going to go get on the
That's
water."
Awesome.
Just super positive and. It was so cool. All day long that day on the phone, he was on speakerphone.
Really? Yeah.
You must have called him then because he keeps calling you back. That's what I always say.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did. Oh, yeah. It was so funny because he didn't want to drive a long way. I was trying to talk him into going to Lake of the Pines because that was early live scope at Pines, and I'd been catching. I think at that point, I'd had 3 17-pound bags on 7 crappie at Lake of the Pines.
How did he get a hold of you?
So. I sold irrigation supplies for Site One's my title sponsor, and I worked for them for 23 years selling supplies. Wow. And I was always kind of the specialty guy. I was the pump guy and the lighting guy. And so one of our good contractors out of Canton was doing his lights and his pumps, and I actually got to help. He wanted to grow big bass in his pond, so I got to pick the fountains and aerators and stuff out. And I've been a fan of Coach Prime since Florida.
Oh yeah.
Since he was in college.
Yeah.
So I've been on his social media for years, and he was already in Canton, and he posted on his Twitter that he wanted to go fishing. I'm gonna give a shout out to the Green Machine, Holly and Jackie. She tagged me in the comments on the post that he did, like play Gann fishing. And then I saw that, and I texted my customer, I screenshot it, sent it to my customer, and he'd gone with us on a work deal, and then he'd brought his kids fishing with me on a guide trip.
Gotcha.
And so he's like, "I'm gonna take some pictures off your Facebook."
That's crazy.
And I'll send it to. He wasn't Coach Prime then; he was just Prime.
Yeah,
Prime time.
Prime time.
And, so he literally called me an hour later.
Wow.
And he's like, "I'm in town for a couple of weeks. I'd love to go get on some fish." And the weather was horrible the next 4 days.
Absolutely.
But we put it together. But the day he met me, fog, you couldn't see 50 yards. And so we met at Lake Palestine Resort at the Villages and just went straight out into the river channel. And I knew there would be fish there. I'd been fishing about 5 miles from there.
And since you've been working on your boat control, you were ready for this day.
Right. And it was glass. It was glass calm that day.
Yeah.
And anyway, first fish he caught was a 176, and then later on in the day he caught one. I said that's probably 2-pounder, and it ended up weighing 191. But he caught some solid slabs that
That's
day for
awesome,
sure.
man. I bet he loved that.
Was he very coordinated as far as dropping on fish and stuff?
He was really good. It was funny. After the first fish, he did
That's a
that
good
video,
question.
and he said, "My first fish of the day is a 176," and he's like, "How'd I do?" And I mean, back then I used to keep a long rod, and I just kind of like tap the water and be like, throw it 5 feet past right here, and he pitched it right out there, and I coached him right down the fish, and he stuck it, and he did great. I thought he did great, and then when he playing the video back, he's like, "I did all right."
Yeah, he's got room for improvement.
But he loves
cool.
to fish, and fishes all the time, handles a rod a lot. So, obviously when you get on a guy trip and people say they fish, and you get early on, you can kind of tell how good they're going to be and
That's
stuff like
awesome,
that.
man.
So,
That's cool.
That's the whole crappie connection.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
the crappie
yeah.
connect. Hey, we got Hank Jr. You taking Hank out, and now we got Prime. Now who am I going to take? Who knows? We never know.
There's no
man.
telling with you, though.
Yeah, there's no. It could be
There's
something
no
way
telling
off
with
the
Dustin.
wall. Way off the wall. For sure.
Well, hopefully, guys, you got some things, some tips to get out there and practice boat control. You will get better. Just give yourself time. Take some patience. Take one day at a time. Get some standing timber. Something stationary, and learn to stay at a controlled distance from it, and you will
Time
get
on the water. That's key.
You will
Time
get that
on the water.
I'll
boat
throw a little
control.
tidbit in there.
Little
if you,
tidbit.
I like it.
little tidbit off Dustin up here. So out there in the water, like if you're a brush pile fisherman or if you're a timber fisherman, if you try to save an hour every time you go out and go do something different. Go try to find you some roaming fish and chase roaming fish. Or if you're a brush pile fisherman, go to that timber for an hour and try to practice that boat control and try to learn that timber bite. Try to broaden your horizons. I remember when I was a weekend guy and before I got into the tournaments, I just wanted to go catch those fish.
Yeah.
And Todd told me early on. He's like, try to do something different every day. Like go shoot some docks or go, try to go learn something new.
Step
every
out
time
of
you
your
go
element.
out.
For sure. Good
Pull some
tidbit.
jigs.
That was a good tidbit.
Pull
When you
some
have
jigs.
crappie connection,
Never done
tidbits.
Yeah.
I missed all that.
Oh,
Not
man.
that ain't still a deal, but we were fixing to start learning to spot a rig right before the scope
Oh, you
came
got to
out.
do it.
You got the man over there to learn that one.
You'll do it. Yeah, it's a fun deal as well, and that's the great thing about crappie fishing. Literally, you can do so many techniques.
many ways.
Catch crappie, take prime time fishing here. I mean, it's no telling where you can end up in this sport and this hobby. It's definitely can be an addiction and very rewarding. I'm very blessed to do what I do in the industry as well.
Me as well.
That's all I got, guys. What about you?
I like it.
Like it,
There's
love
some
it.
good tidbits in this one.
Make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn your notifications on. Join us Tuesday nights, Today's Bite. I got the stash at the end every week with me, and we will holler later.
Yes, sir.
About a mile from Big Muddy River, a place I'll always remember. Cabin on the lake and a fishing pole. Forever here I'll rest my soul. I can feel my worries drift away.